house needs painting, grass needs mowing, where's he at?
Hi, this is Hank. Sorry I missed your call. Leave me your name and your number and I'll get back to you.
He's gone fishing.
Today's podcast is brought to you by Mossy Oak and Liqua Molly.
Welcome to Off the Water with Hank Parker. I'm your co-host, Sarah Beth, and you are?
I'm Hank Parker, and we're going to be talking a little fishing. I got to fish last week, Sarah Beth, and nothing worked to my expectations. And so I realized that sometimes you can think you've got it all figured out prior to getting to the lake. And when you get there, the fish have got a total different idea than what you had.
So goes life. You know?
So goes life.
So goes life.
I like that. So we're going to talk about shifting gears and talk about what happens when you're caught off guard and the unexpected hits you instead of the expected. You know, I really thought I had it all laid out. I've fished this lake before, and water temperature was right where I wanted it to be. And I thought I had the perfect game plan. Turned out I did not at all have the perfect game plan. The fish were not nearly as aggressive as I anticipated them to be, and I had to completely abandon what I thought was going to work and shift gears and start going down through the plan B, plan C, plan E, D, go through the whole
alphabet.
I got out of place there.
It's okay.
It's not CBA, it's ABC.
Hey, it's okay. We love you how you are.
When I got out of school.
You got out?
Well, yeah, I got out. They paroled me after.
They paroled you.
They paroled me after a while, but I got out of school. I thought the alphabet started with a D. I had no idea what ABC was. So it's very easy for me to get things out of context. So let me go say a plan D and then plan E instead of plan E and then plan D. And I caught 6 or 5 nice bass.
Six or five
of them, yeah.
Six or five.
6 or 5, yeah. It was really exciting. Had 6 or 5 good ones.
Good ones.
All right, let's go. Here we go. Hey, I got to fish last week, and that was exciting. I fished 2 or 3 weeks ago down in Florida, and it was the first time I got to go in a long time in the month of February and just fish about 5 or 6 uninterrupted days. You know, I went to a couple different lakes, and I fished a lot of different things and a lot of different techniques, and fished a lot of different, when I say things, different types of structure. I fished lily pads, I fished hydrilla, I fished milfoil, I fished reeds, I fished pretty much open water with some scattered coontail grass, and I fished some canals that had no grass at all, and just a variety of structure, and fished a lot of different baits. And even when I was fishing in Florida, some of the things I fished with Big Bass Ran, and he had it figured out pretty good the first day, but then things changed up for him, and we knocked around there and had a pretty tough time as well. So
what made it difficult? What changed?
I think the fish were moving up to spawn, and because I think, now this is my philosophy, I think there was so much boat pressure. There were boats everywhere. I think those fish were so heavily molested that they just decided to, hey, back out. This is getting out of hand. I think the fish were moving up trying to spawn, and they were just getting hit in the head, lure after lure after lure. And so I think that was the problem. And those fish just backed off and suspended. And I am not figured out the Humminbird calls theirs the landscape mode. I think Garmin calls theirs the perspective mode on forward-facing sonar. I would have just liked to look to see if I could find where those fish went when they pulled out, but I didn't. There's so much vegetation and grass and structure of all sorts that I couldn't figure out where those fish went. But I think because of fishing pressure that those fish pulled out. Now, I fished a private lake that I have been fishing for years last week in Alabama, and man, that water temperature is right where I wanted it. It was 58 degrees in the morning when we started, and it would warm up to like 62 degrees. So I felt really good about these fish being very aggressive. They're going to be excited. You know, they're going to be like kids at the circus.
Right.
intense.
Ready to go.
Yeah. But it wasn't that way at all. I mean, it was not that way at all. You couldn't hardly get them to bite a spinnerbait. Water was off-colored. So I thought a bladed jig and a spinnerbait was going to be the two prime baits. It was not. Threw it quite a bit. I was blown away that I couldn't even hardly get a bite on the spinnerbait.
Really?
And that really surprised me at water temperature warming up to 62. We talk about fishing the water column. We start out in the morning, the water down below is probably the warmest. And then as the sun heats the water up and that surface temperature gets up to 62, 63 degrees, those fish normally suspend up and get in that upper water column, and you can catch them really good with a bait that you can control the speed of the bait in the different water columns. So you might want to use a bigger blade on a spinnerbait, or if they're real aggressive, you might want to use a smaller blade. I mean, a lighter bait. You got all kind of options, but
right.
I threw quite a bit, a different type spinnerbaits, and it didn't pay off. So here we go.
Here we go.
Yeah, here we go. We're on plan A. It's not working. So I thought, well, plan B, I'll fish a jerkbait. And a jerkbait, and I'll fish a suspended jerkbait. Arc has a super duper jerkbait that I really, really like, and I've been very successful with that. And I've caught a lot of fish with this particular bait, and I couldn't get them to bite it. So then Arc also has a really good jerk bait that floats. So I thought, well, maybe they're in this upper water column, and that may be the bait. Well, I caught one or two small fish, not at all what I'm looking to do. So I'm thinking, what in the world do we need to do? And so I thought, I love to fish a jig. I love to fish a jig in the springtime. And normally for me, that jig is super duper effective when that water temperature is 50 up to about 57 or 58. And then the fish start suspending up higher in the water column, and you might catch them on a swimming jig, but a traditional method of fishing a jig, hopping it on the bottom and swimming and dropping and that sort of stuff, normally not as effective for me unless I'm fishing in grass or buckbrush, which I was doing neither. I was fishing a lot of wood, lay down logs, cedar trees that had been sunk in the lake, rock ledges, and that sort of thing.
Right. So you move to your second bait. So you go to your jig.
No, my second bait was my jerk bait.
Your second, the jerk bait. So spinnerbait to the jerk bait.
I fished a bladed jig also. So I fished a spinnerbait and a bladed jig and didn't do very good on it.
All right. Which one was the best one?
The bladed jig was a little better than the spinnerbait, but neither one was the bait that I was looking for. So then I switched from there to the jerk bait. I thought, well, that suspending jerk bait that'll stop down there and kind of pause at about 6 foot, that's going to be the ticket. And it wasn't. I caught some on it. Then I thought, well, slow sinking pawpaw, that's going to be the ticket. And I've caught them, killed them, absolutely wiped them out on this lake with that bait before. But that didn't work. We caught some, but not what we were looking for. So we've kind of gone through A, B, C, and really D, because I used two different jerk baits. And then I started using a Arc's lipless crankbait. It's got a different wobble. It's different than the pawpaw, and I caught quite a few fish on it, but I didn't catch the big fish.
Yeah. Let me ask you this. You think bass fishing now is getting harder? I mean, now you've talked about two different locations where you feel like bass weren't behaving as they normally do. Like in your mind, you're kind of having to readjust yourself and readjust your method of fishing. Do you think that that's gotten harder over the years?
I think fishing pressure does make it much more difficult, but I had two different scenarios here. I had one lake that had no fishing pressure, was completely controlled by the landowner, and I had a public water in Florida, 3 public lakes, and I fished in Florida, and they were getting hammered.
Wow.
I mean, it was 80 degrees.
Right.
And it was February.
And everybody wants to go out.
From every state in America where it's freezing cold. I mean, up here in South Carolina, at home, when I was in Florida, it was 80 degrees. It's 35 degrees
Yeah,
and
it was
raining.
freezing.
Who doesn't want to be in Florida fishing?
Yeah, that's true. Snowbirds.
So everybody's there. And people complain about that. One time I was on Lake Norman, I was catching stripers, and we caught them really, really good. And the next day, man, there was 10,000 boats out there, and you couldn't catch them. So I came back to the boat ramp, and I was loading up, and there was a guy there, and he said, "You doing good?" I said, "No, it was way too many boats." And he looked at me and said, "And you were one of them."
Exactly, you were.
Yeah.
I know, that's
and
so funny.
Think about that. We're on public water, so don't pout that you have rights that other people don't have. I mean, come on. I was one of them. I was one of the too many boats. So we were hammering these fish down at Lake Orange and Loch Lusa and Baxter and some of these other lakes that I fish. But hey, I was one of the guys hammering them. So I don't have any right to complain. But understanding what's going on with the fish, I do believe it was too much pressure on the lake. So
what do you think is going to happen like 10 years down the road from now with bass in general? Do you think they're going to just become ridiculous to try to catch, or what do you think?
No, I don't. If you look at the creel, if you look at the weigh-ins, and you look at these different states and different lakes that offer creel surveys, they're more difficult for me to catch, but somebody's figured it out.
Somebody, yeah.
Yeah, they're catching
That's
them.
true.
I mean, look at the reports. Look at the weigh-ins. I mean, I fish Lake Murray down in South Carolina, and Lake Murray is a lake that gives me a fit. But I turn around, and every time there's a tournament, somebody's got 27 pounds, 29 pounds, 30 pounds, 32 pounds, catching 7-pounders, 8-pounders. I mean, it's crazy.
Wow.
So they've got it figured out, and people have always been able to adapt. And that's why we have the variety of lures. That's why we have
baits,
the variety of line. You know, Berkeley Trilline's developing new line every day. They're working on something new and trying to make it thinner, trying to make it more flexible, trying to make it more abrasive resistant. All the things that we need to be able to catch fish, people are working on. Rods and reels, lues, man, they got guys that are working around the clock to improve the experience of being able to make the application you need, whether it's skipping under a dock like Andy Montgomery does, or if it's fishing a little finesse minnow on a 7-foot spinning rod out in 100 foot of water. I mean, they're working constantly to give us the tools that we need to make whatever application necessary to catch these fish, and that's what it takes. If all we had today is basically what I had in 1975 and 6 when I started, we'd be in big trouble.
Yeah.
We would not be catching the fish that are being caught.
Right. Well, I feel like you totally hit it on the head when you said that we evolve kind of with the fish. The more that the fish is going to advance and change their behavior, we have to change as well to keep up with it.
Absolutely. And I think fish get used to a lure. You know, that you'll come out with a new lure, and that thing will be hot as a pistol. And then then all of a sudden they just kind of quit on it, and you make some kind of adaptation. You change this or that, or a new little design comes out, and all of a sudden that becomes hot. And I used to say, and I used to believe that I think it's true to a point, we left some really good lures behind from the marketing standpoint to develop something new, because we had to have something new to catch the fisherman, not the fish. And so we did away with a lure that was very effective to bring on something new. But I bring a lot of those old baits back, and they're not the answer. So I'm not sure that we did run off and leave them. I'm thinking something new was the right call after all.
Yeah.
So fish wise up pretty quick too, I can tell you that.
Trial and error, yeah. They
wise up. I've told this story before. Ray Scott, he had a lake that he developed at his home in Pitlaw, Alabama. And Ray's Lake, it was the home of the presidential bass tournament where President Bush and all these different fishermen came around and competed for raising money. Ray had a church that he was working on, so we all contributed to Ray's cause, and we got to fish with the President of the United States, and we got to hang out with George W. and George W. Herbert, and that was a big deal. So, but Ray's Lake was special. He really took care of that thing, and there were a lot of big fish in it. So Ray called me one day and said, "Hanko, I want you to come down here and fish with me. I want to do a show. Well, he was developing a video series called Great Small Waters, teaching people how to build private lakes and how to manage them and how to take care of them.
That's cool.
And I learned a lot from Ray, and I learned a little bit from Great Small Waters, but I learned more talking to Ray and listening to his philosophies. And he worked with Auburn University and their fisheries department, and they were pretty sharp. I say that. They were very, very sharp. They collected a lot of data, and so I learned a lot about private lakes. But I taught Ray something that he didn't know. Orlando Wilson, my buddy Orlando Wilson, he had a television show going at that time. And so Ray called me and said, Hank, I want you to come down here and do a show with me, and we're going to promote how to manage a pond with Great Small Waters. I said, okay, Ray, I'm coming. But here I got one stipulation. You don't let anybody fish the lake for 1 month. And he said, well, I said, no exceptions. I'm honest and I'm serious. I don't mind you fishing it. You can fish it all day long. You can fish it every day. You can bring your Sunday school class over and you guys can fish all night and day. I don't care. But I'm not coming. And he said, well, what's the deal? I said, Ray, the fish are completely different when you fish them versus when you let them rest. And so he argued a little bit, but he said, hey, if that's your stipulation, I will live up to that. So about a week before I was going to go, Ray called me and said, Hank, Orlando Wilson is behind. He needs a show really quick. He's called me and asked me if he can come down here. And I was coming down on Tuesday. He called and asked if he could come down Tuesday morning and real quickly shoot a show. And I said, no, nope. Absolutely no.
N-O.
I said, I'll tell you what I can do, Ray. I can come down Monday, and you and I can fish on Monday, and then we can fish Tuesday morning, and Orlando can shoot on Tuesday afternoon. He said, okay. All right, I'll call him and tell him. So I ended up going down on Sunday evening. Ray and I fished all day Monday, and we caught 100 bass.
Wow.
Ray caught one, and we've played it on our Look Back series on our YouTube show where he called it, look at that bass. It's looked like hen eggs. His eyes are so big, look like hen eggs. And so everybody made a comment on that. But the story that I want to tell is we caught 100 bass that first day. Well, Orlando ended up coming down on Wednesday. So Ray and I fished all day Tuesday as well. And on Tuesday, we caught maybe 45 or 50 bass. And we caught some pretty good ones. That first day, we had 2 over 10 and 3 or 4 in that 8 to 9 pound range. Now, the second day, we didn't catch near as many big fish. We might have caught one that was around 9 pounds. But the rest of them, most of them were in that 5 or 6 range.
Yeah.
So we caught about 45 on Tuesday. Orlando fished on Wednesday, and I think he caught 6.
That's a big difference, going from 100 to 6.
Yeah, and Ray said, you need to teach Orlando how to fish. I said, let me tell you something, Ray. Orlando is an awesome fisherman, and he knew exactly what to do. If we would have reversed that, it would have been me catching 6. I'm telling you, these fish wise up. And Ray honestly didn't believe that as much as I stressed it for about a year. And he told me, he said, you know, we started having these little tournaments. I'm trying to get people to take these small fish out. So we had tournaments where the smallest stringer would win the tournament. 15 bass that would weigh 13 pounds would be the top score versus 15 bass that weighed 20 pounds.
What?
Smallest fish you could catch. So
he wanted them gone.
So they were using little bitty baits, little bitty inline spinner, all kind of stuff. But he said, you know, even with those little fish, we'd have a 3-day event, and I'd have all these great prizes, and I'd have all these bass clubs coming out of all around Montgomery, and they would be fishing for these little fish. But even after the second day, it got where you catch 500 the first day. Second day you'd catch 200 or 300. Third day you wouldn't catch but about 50. He said, it shut them down. He said,
they hunger down.
Yeah.
Get to the safe house.
Yeah.
The aliens are coming.
He said,
That's all I see.
I never realized that. I said, Ray, I've seen it over and over and over again. And so we go back to where we started, going from plan A down to D and E on trying to figure these fish out on the lake I was fishing in Alabama. In Florida, I believe the cause of the fish shutting down and behaving different than what I thought they would is because of fishing pressure. Well, now I'm in Alabama where fishing pressure is not an issue. Mm-hmm. But these fish are not behaving at all like I thought they should.
Right.
So what was the deal? So let me tell you, I went from throwing the spinnerbait to throwing the inline bladed jig, and then throwing a suspended jerkbait, then throwing a floating jerkbait, then throwing a slow sinking pawpaw. I fished it much like a suspended jerkbait, and I haven't found what's happening. So I changed to that little arc lipless crankbait. Pick up that bait right there. I don't even know the name. Arc.
This one
names their baits.
It's a part of their Z series. This one's a Z63.
Z63.
In the shade Mad Shad.
Mad Shad.
Mad Shad.
Mad Shad.
Yeah, hold on. I'm gonna hold that
He's
up.
He's angry.
I'll pop a picture up too.
Is it kind of like
screen.
Angry Bird? He's angry. All right. It's a Z63 Mad Shad.
That's pretty cool.
But that thing has a different. There used to be a bait made, Hedden made it 100 years ago called a Bayou Boogie. I don't know what the deal was about the Bayou Boogie. It had a different wiggle than a rattle trap, a different wiggle than a hot spot, a different. It had a completely different wiggle. It displaced water differently than the hot lipless crankbaits. And that Bayou Boogie would catch fish when the rest of them wouldn't. That's kind of the way that Mad Shad Arc is. Z63. It's got a different wobble. So I caught them on that good when I shifted and changed to the
lipless. Yeah, when you shifted to that one.
Shifted gears.
Yeah.
Went from first to second.
Keep on. All right.
Okay. Well, we caught, and but I didn't catch the big one. So I know this lake by history has got some big bass in it. Mm-hmm. So how are we gonna catch these fish? So my buddy, and I love this, I did a podcast with Randy Tharp. I have emceed bass tournaments, and it was always Randall Tharp. So Randy Tharp has designed a jig for arc. It's the best jig I've ever fished with. And so he corrected me from calling him Randall to calling him Randy. And so I'm always saying a Randy Tharp jig, and then I'm always wanting to say Randall, because when I first met him, that's the way he was introduced to me, and that's the way that was his name when I was emceeing the tournament. So I'm fussing at myself by calling him Randall Tharp jig. I said, no, Randy Tharp jig. Well, I pick up the pack, the arc pack, and what does it say?
Randall Tharp. Randall Tharp. I was going to say, that's literally on his social media too, like his page. That's so funny though that he's like a stickler about that.
If you're listening, Randy, you are no longer Randy. You will be Randall Tharp forever. So
you said, let me see your birth certificate. What's your legal name?
That's it. We're Randall Tharp. So I get a Randall Tharp jig. Now, I just mentioned earlier that I love that jig. Mm-hmm. It's one of my favorites. And I normally catch fish on jigs, fish them on the bottom, hopping the rocks, kind of swimming them through the brush, letting them fall. Mm-hmm. I normally do that when that water temperature is around 50.
Okay.
And then I shift gears, and when that water gets about 57, 58, and start really working on the water column, I don't stay on the bottom as much. And when I was fishing that jig, I'm kind of keeping it on the bottom. So now it's 62-degree water temperature in the afternoon, and you figure a jig's not going to be the best bait of choice. It was. Yeah. It was absolutely. And I fished it like the water temperature was 50. I mean, they wanted it slow. They wanted it deliberate. They did not want it hopping. They wanted it dragging. And so it really surprised me, and it was a pleasant surprise because I love fishing a jig. I think out of all the tournaments that you've ever looked at and go back, when we started fishing live rubber jigs, the size of the fish increased. I think there's been more tournament weigh-ins. Denny Breyer killed everybody for years fishing a live rubber jig and flipping it and pitching it and casting it as well. Any way you can fish a jig, Denny can fish it. And he just broke records on a jig.
Wow.
And Bobby Murray and I had, as a team, even though we weren't a team, we were competing against each other, but as a boat, we had the biggest string weighed in a BASS tournament for years and caught most of them on a jig.
Yeah.
So a jig catches big fish, so I like fishing with a jig. In 1982, I caught the lake record in Lake Wiley, North Carolina, with like 43 or 44 pounds. I don't remember exactly.
Wow.
But I caught them on jig.
Yep.
Every one of them. And so a jig catches big fish, so I like fishing a jig. So we took that Randall Tharp jig, put a little X-Zone, and let me mention that little X-Zone crawfish I put on the back. I no longer work for X-Zone. They sponsored me for a year, and our marketing philosophies weren't aligned perfectly. And so they decided that it would probably be better for them to advertise more on social media rather than television, and to put all their money more or less in the tournament social media opposed to on traditional television with a guy like me. And I don't blame them, and I don't say that it was a bad move.
Right.
Bad move on their part, but we parted ways. The Van Ryn family, awesome people, had no problem with that. But I still like their product. A lot of people say, well, the only reason you use this is they pay you to use it. And people believe that, and I understand it, and there are a lot of people that do that. But I really like their product, and I like their floating tails that they have on these hand-poured baits.
Right.
So I used that little X-Zone crawfish on the back of that jig and that little tail float. So I fished it very deliberate and very slow. But that to prove a point that I don't do it just for money, because they don't pay me at all. And I used it on television because I thought it was the right bait to use. And because things didn't work out from a marketing philosophy, I still think they make a great bait. And so I used it, and it worked out fine. But the point that I'm trying to make is I ended up catching those fish as if the water temperature was 10 degrees colder than it really was. I fished it. They were far more lethargic. Those fish were not aggressive. And
not to what they should have been for the temperature,
not
correct?
Not at all what they should have been. And I don't have an explanation for that. I don't have a clue. But that's the whole point that I'm trying to make is when you go to the lake and you have preconceived ideas on what's going to work and you stick with that, you may come home with a big goose egg. So you got to be able to adapt and change and follow and go down the alphabet. The more you know, the more options you have, the higher the odds are that you will figure out what the lure, what the technique, what the presentation, all of the above, what it takes to catch fish on that particular given day.
Right. Well, and it even goes back to what you were saying, how they were acting more lethargic when, in your mind, you're thinking, okay, the water temperatures in the 50s, they shouldn't be as lethargic as they acted. So if you would have only come prepared with what you would have thought in your mind, you probably would have been pretty done for.
Yeah.
You wouldn't have caught anything. Really.
That's the whole point. In our previous podcast, we've talked about all these different lures. Do you need all these different lures? How to understand what they do. Look at a fishing lure like a tool. We've talked about that in previous podcasts. Well, here I lived this out just last week. And it's relevant to exactly what took place. So it's worth talking about, current events. I mean, it just happened. And so I'm faced with that. And so it reminds me on how important it is to know all the different methods and techniques and lures and understand and being able to adapt. Now, I was pretty fortunate that my fifth or sixth try paid off, but also it took me just a minute. I was swimming that jig a lot. When I'd get in a brush pile, I'd swim it over the top of that brush pile and drop it on the other side, and boy, I wouldn't get any bites. When I started getting my bites, I'd slowly ease it into that brush pile, shake it a little bit, let it sit there, slowly, boom, I started getting bites. And I thought, man,
You got to play the game.
yeah.
You got to put on a little show for them.
Well, hey, these fish are lethargic. They want that thing slow.
In front of them.
They do not want it like normal 60-degree water temperature bass want it.
No, they want their food delivered to them, fast food. They want Uber Eats. They don't want to go out and get it themselves.
So
they want it right in front of them.
You think I was kind of being like DoorDash?
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Hank Parker, DoorDash efficient.
Yeah, we're DoorDashing it right there to the house, knocking on the door. Here is your hot
Here's your meal.
Randall Tharp.
Randall Tharp.
Yeah, come on, get you some Randall Tharp. Dude.
That's so funny.
So that's the way we end up catching our fish, and we caught some really big ones. I was fishing with Todd Ayers. He caught a 8-14.
Those
I caught
those
a
were good.
7-13 and a 7-12.
Those were good. I'm going to insert those pictures too on the video. So if you're listening on Spotify, if you want to go check out the pictures, you can go to our YouTube channel, just Hank Parker Productions, and click on we post our podcast on YouTube as well. So I'm going to insert some of those pictures because I thought those were so cool. Those were some good bass.
Yeah.
Y'all caught that day.
I like good bass. You know, the aggravating, you got a job. People telling me last week, they said, what'd you do all week? I said, I worked. They said, oh, you worked? I said, yeah, I had to go fishing. You call that work? I said, man, work. We started catching these big old bass, these 5 and 6 and 7 pound. They would not quit.
Yeah.
Man, they'd run up under your boat and they pull, and you got to wrestle with them trying to get them out of the water. Man,
Look, y'all really don't understand
how hard I work.
No, you do though. You're nonstop. You have a harder schedule than I do. I'm 21 years old. You're 71 years old.
Well, you don't be telling that.
It's too late. It's already out there. It's public knowledge now. PSA.
Hey, for 14 more days.
For what? Oh, yeah, you do have a... Oh, yeah, that's right.
Oh, yeah. Okay,
Oh, yeah.
but we're not going to talk about birthdays. You know, Franco Hill, my buddy, said a long time ago, birthdays.
Oh, let's hear that.
So if you keep having them, sooner or later, they'll kill you. So I'm trying to call those birthdays off. It's not working.
I'm such a morbid person. I do the same thing. I already have my funeral planned out, by the way.
Oh, well, that's good.
Just so you know.
Well,
I don't want to live past 60. I think past 60, I'm just going to get euthanized.
You'll change your mind when you're 59. I can promise you that.
I'm gonna tell you. The way that my hips creak in the morning is not it.
Look here, you don't. A friend of mine told me one time we were sitting in a room, a bunch of old guys sitting around, and one of them said, "Yeah, old John, he's gonna live to be 100." And there's a man over there who was 99 years old, and one of the other men said, "Who wants to live to be 100?" The old fella said, "Whoever's 99."
Yeah,
You're just 99. One more year, brother. One more year. One more year.
Yeah.
So that's good. I am so blessed. I'm able to fish all day long. I can go from daylight to dark. I can go multiple days in a row. I don't say I don't hurt a little bit, but that's not a big deal. But being able to adapt to changes,
Correct.
being able to shift gears, and that's why we have all these lures. That's why we have all these rods and reels. That's why we have all this electronic stuff.
Technology.
Yeah.
All this technology.
Yeah, it's pretty amazing. And let me tell you, the forward-facing sonar deal, live sonar has given us an education like nothing else. All these philosophies that we had and all the speculation that we had done in the past, a lot of that's being proven to be untrue.
Right.
I thought I had it all together. It's almost embarrassing to realize these fish didn't do at all what I thought they were doing.
Right. Okay, but in your defense, you were coming at it seeing red flags or danger for the sport. So, I mean, I feel like people that bring up the other side of it, saying forward-facing sonar is bad, or trying to talk about more of the old days of, where is this forward-facing sonar going? I understand where they're coming from, of the sense of they want to at least voice their own concerns. But, I agree.
Well, now,
I agree with you. Now, a lot of that's been proven
really
incorrect.
Talking about the philosophies. The NPFL tournament organization, they don't allow sonar. Forward-facing. They allow sonar, but they don't allow forward-facing.
Yeah.
And I think that's cool. I think that's cool to have options. And then I think Major League Fishing has narrowed it down to you can use it one period out of the day.
Yeah.
So they're adapting and changing and modifying rules. But I wasn't talking about the philosophy.
Oh, you're talking about
whether it's hurting the sport. I'm just talking about the information that it's given us as fishermen. I used to think that these fish would migrate and go to a different place.
Yep.
And now I find out all they did when they got so much pressure put on them or the weather changed, they just pulled pulled out in front. You know, we go fish
Yeah.
Lake Norman, and boat docks is the ticket. I mean, it's the hot ticket on Lake Norman, is fishing boat docks. Well, you get too much pressure on these boat docks. I thought the fish left. Well, they didn't. They just pulled right out in front.
Right.
And you could see them now on your forward-facing sonar suspended out in front of those boat docks. So they didn't actually migrate to the point like I thought, or to the back of the pocket like I thought. They
Yep.
just pulled out. And I tell you, another thing that we're discovering that there's some fish out there that we've never fished for.
Yeah, that's what you were saying. Like in the middle of the lake,
Yeah.
really deep, and you would have never thought a bass would be
never
over there.
looked for them, never thought, been running
Never.
over them. We've probably been doing that for years.
Probably.
And at the Lake Fork tournament, Kurt Kelly, who is a wildlife officer at Lake Fork, who is a friend of mine, I've had him on my show. He's a crappie expert, and I've had him on my show. We've done a couple shows together, bass fishing and crappie fishing. And Kurt was working on the lake when they had the tournament last year, where 3 guys caught over, 10 guys. The top 10 guys all had 100 pounds plus. They all broke 100 pounds, which is insane. But they were catching a lot of these fish out in front of a pretty famous spawning area, a big flat on Lake Fork, and they were catching them out. So we all thought for 100 years, catching those fish out there, those fish were staging, holding, getting ready to move up to spawn. Well, it worked out that when a lot of these fish were caught, they were spewing roe,
Right.
which means they were actually spawning. So they were catching them out there in 25 and 30 foot of water. They were spawning. I never dreamt of that.
All the way out there.
Yeah, that
Yeah.
deep. We're thinking they're going to move up there in that 5 or 6 foot of water or shallower and spawn. And so they're holding out there. But no, they were actually spawning out there. And so that's information that only forward-facing sonar has been able to offer to us.
I think that's really cool, because who's to say either they've done this the entire time and they've always been that way, or maybe they've changed their behavior due to pressure or other predators, or whatever the reason is that they felt the need to go deeper to do that. Maybe they feel safer in that
When you say
environment.
predators, you know, really and truly, the biggest predator a bass has is
people.
the angler.
Yep. You've said that before.
I mean, really, that's true. And you think about that, fishing pressure, you know, you go where the deer are coming out into a field, and if every time they come out in that field, there's coyotes show up, they're going to quit coming out in that field.
Yeah.
And not that they have a mind to reason, but they've got a tremendous instinct for preservation.
For self-preservation.
That's exactly right.
Exactly.
And that's their instinct.
Survival.
So every time a bass moves up on a stump, if you're hitting him in the head with a rubber worm, jerking a hook in his mouth, after a while, he's going to quit pulling up on that stump.
Yeah, absolutely.
He's going to say, I'm
He is.
getting away from that stump. I'm going to go right here in the middle of the lake and just suspend.
Yeah, and guess what? They might have gotten away with that because people didn't know they were out there, so they're not fishing for it.
So
that
what you're
became
saying
like a
makes a lot of sense if you think about it. We're thinking these fish have been out there, and that's been a part of their behavior pattern forever, and we just didn't realize it. We thought fish always related to structure, and that fish had a migration route like a creek channel or a stump row or what a road bed or whatever is there for them to migrate, but some sort of structure. And now we're learning these fish will just pull out and suspend and be out in the middle of nothing where there is no creek channel.
yeah.
And what you're saying is maybe that's not something they've always done. Maybe that's something they just started doing
Because of pressure.
because of pressure.
Right. They said, I'm packing my bags. We're leaving. We're skipping town.
You know, that makes a lot of sense. And I think there may be something to that. So it may be that these fish have not been out there for 50 years in the middle of the lake in 100 foot of water suspending like they're doing now. Maybe it's because we're the coyote in the field.
Right. Well, like you said before, a deer herd isn't going to go straight into the coyote's den and hang around. You know what I mean? They know to avoid certain areas or like certain signs, or they can smell predators and stuff like that.
For sure.
So they're gonna avoid
is all their instincts. A lot of people want to give animals a lot of credit for having a mind to reason. I don't believe an animal has a mind like a human being to reason right from wrong and reason this or reason that. But they do have a keen instincts for self-preservation, and they use it. And I think a bass does. And I think that's why when I went to Ray's Lake, Ray and I caught the fire out of them, but they wised up. And when Orlando came in 3 days after we hammered them, they weren't nearly as aggressive. And that's an understatement. But nevertheless, I do think fishing pressure is probably the reason we're finding some of these fish out in this wide open water.
Right. I'm so curious to see what the next decade kind of has for the fish, how their temperament might change. Like, okay, let's say people start hammering the deeper waters now. Now they feel like they have nowhere to go that is safe. So how is that going to affect the temperament of the fish? Are they going to start stressing out? Are we going to start seeing weird behaviors kind of start up? What are we going to see in this fish? Because it's been shown not only in bass, there are other species too that have been proven when a pressure is put on them, they will change like their temperament and their patterns and everything else.
I'm glad you're thinking about the next decade. I'm thinking about the next month. 21 years old.
Hey, now. I think you're going to outlive all of us. Let's
I'll be old and Bill Dance, Good grace alive.
I know. Goodness.
I hope I can grow up to be like Bill Dance and still want to go out and fish all day by myself in 100-degree weather when I'm 85. He's
Ain't no
quite
way.
a remarkable guy. But nevertheless, there's a lot to be learned. And we talk about, and I thought it would just be a great time to talk about application, because we talked about, in theory, why you need all these baits and why you need to be versatile and what could happen if you don't have the expertise or the understanding of a bait. Well, just last week it all played out for me. I thought I knew what was going on. I went through what's logically going to be and what in the past history has proven to be the right lure for the situation, and it was not. And we had to adapt and had to change, and so we drew on what we'd been talking about weeks earlier about being versatile and having all this technology and all these new rods and reels and lures and methods and drop shots and all the different things that we've learned to do to be more of a finesse fisherman. And I think it's going to be more and more and more of that in the future. You're talking about the next decade. I think we're going to, one day we're going to be fishing instead of 12 thousandths and 10 thousandths diameter line, calling that light line. I think we're going to be fishing 4 thousandths and 5 thousandths, this little bitty, teeny, small diameter line, dropping down to smaller lures, doing more and more and more finesse. I think it's coming.
Yeah, I can see that. But hey, I mean, I think that pretty much wraps up today.
You're out of here, aren't you?
No. I'm just saying for the challenge.
She got to go get that hair done and them nails polished. How about
I got my nails done.
Oh, you're looking good,
but,
girl.
I would just say, I mean, all of this being said, bass fishing is getting harder, as you said, but like you said in previous podcasts, enjoy the challenge and just make sure that you still have fun. Be prepared for all conditions. As you said, like all of that is changing, and you're seeing more changes in the behavior of the fish, so just keep that in mind and just have fun.
I think that is the ultimate. Have fun. Enjoy the sport. It's a wonderful sport, and man, it's just good to get out there and be on the water and enjoy what God's provided for us, and take care of the water, take care of the resources. You know, we our show is sponsored by Mossy Oak and Liqua Molly. We're grateful to those guys, but Mossy Oak, to me, is the leader in conservation philosophy. Their whole, Toxie Hayes, the founder of Mossy Oak, is honestly, I know him personally. I know him like a brother. I've spent time with him. I've spent time with him sitting by a tree in the middle of the woods, yelping at turkeys, yelping at turkeys. And I know him. I've spent time with him and his dad, Mr. Fox, and Toxie Hayes is the single most conscientious guy that I know of. Let's leave this planet, let's leave this farm, let's leave this tract of land better than we found it. Let's take care of our critters. Let's
Right.
be good stewards, and he's all about that. And I love Mossy Oak for that reason. I aligned myself with Mossy Oak over 20 years ago, probably more like 30 years ago, for that reason, because they're so into taking care of our environment. And they make wonderful patterns for camouflage. They make
Yes,
great
they do.
clothing for fishermen. But their philosophy in conservation is what really attracts me to Mossy Oak. So let's enjoy fishing. Let's have fun, as you
Right.
say. But let's take care of it. Let's put those bass back in the water. Let's don't take them and put them in the frying pan out of public waters.
No, or in the fish tanks either.
Yeah.
I've seen some videos. There's a trend going on of some people taking bass out of the lakes and putting them in like these massive fish tanks at home and just watching them. Like,
Well,
I don't know. I feel
you
like
know,
I don't know if that's illegal, but
In moderation, I'm
You know.
okay with that. 1 or 2 or 3. But I mean, there are people that literally are great fishermen. The lake I fish on,
Yeah.
and it drives me out of my mind, it's public water. There's a 5 bass limit, so they have the right to do it under the law. But they even abuse that. 2 guys will go down there, and
Get
they'll catch
5
10 bass.
5 each. Yeah.
It doesn't matter if they're 10 pounders. They're going to keep every one of them. They're going to take them home. They're going to cut their heads off, or they're going to give them to somebody else to cut their heads off.
To cook, yeah.
Flay them. I'm so against that, and it drives me nuts. I'll tell a quick story.
Okay.
I was fishing on the Broad River, and I was up behind the Neal Shoals Dam, and a guy's fishing there, and he catches a smallmouth that ended up, I found out later, weighed 7 pounds 1 ounce. But I knew it was a bigger smallmouth than I'd ever caught out of the river myself.
Yeah.
And he caught this fish, and he's getting ready to put it in a 5-gallon bucket. And it's literally making me vomit. I am literally
Physically sick.
It makes me sick. And
Yeah.
I said, "Hey, buddy, what are you gonna do with that fish?" He said, "I'm gonna take him home and eat him." I said, "Hey, I'll
you're
give you
not.
$100 for him." He said, "Nah, I'm gonna show him off. I'm gonna see what he weighs." I said, "Well, I can weigh him for you and tell you what he weighs." "Well, no, I wanna go back and weigh it myself." I said, $100. He said, "Nah." So we fished about 30 minutes, and he said, "Hey, you say you give me $100 for that fish?" I said, "Oh no, no, I wouldn't give you nothing for it." He said, "What? You said you give me $100 for it." I said,
Alive.
"Yeah, that was 30 minutes ago." He said, "Well, what's different now?" I said, "I was going to let you turn him loose."
Yeah.
He said, "You just going to give me $100 to turn that fish loose?" Yeah. Yeah, not that I'm rich. I mean, $100 is a lot of money.
Yeah.
But I would
it
have
would
willingly given him that to turn that 7 pound 1 ounce smallmouth bass back into Broad River, and he didn't do
Yeah.
it. Took it home. Turned out he was a neighbor of a great friend of mine, and he sends me a picture of that fish. He said, "Why don't you look at this big fish?" I said, "Oh, I've already seen that fish."
Yeah. Yeah.
And it makes me sick. I don't want to see it again. I can't even fish at that section of the Broad River in May. I can't fish there. I can't watch them slaughter those fish. There's so many people put them in 5-gallon buckets and take them home. It's public water. I have no right. I have no right to say anything, but I have every right to be sick about it. And
Yeah,
it makes me sick.
you
So-
can you can feel however you want to feel about something. Well, especially when you feel like, I mean, they can keep growing. You know,
Oh,
it's
man.
preservation of that. Like, I mean, just be mindful. I think people just catch what they can and then just take it home.
Our public waters are way more fragile than we think they are. And I learned that firsthand in the 70s fishing Santee Cooper, and I should be put in the electric chair for all the big bass I personally carried out of Santee Cooper. I should be
Wow.
whipped to a whipping post. But
Wow.
I'll be honest as I know how, I did not know any better. But now that I do, boy, I want to preach that message, catch and release. Let's put those fish back, pat them on the head, give them a sugar like Jimmy Houston, and let them go.
Yeah,
That's
I
a
think
big deal.
that's a good one.
Public waters,
about
it's a
preservation.
big deal, man. Big deal. Put them
Absolutely.
back.
Put them back.
Put
Hank
'em
Parker
back.
said it
All
right here.
It's time to put them back, Sarah Beth. We got to go.
All right, it's time to put them back in the water. And with that, I'll see you guys next week.
Hey, thanks for being with us. God bless you. See you next time.